how the hell do you go from driving a race car fast to getting behind a computer and driving an Excel spreadsheet?
Today, we have an interesting podcast around the topic of accounting. Ashley Walsh from GJ Walsh & Co., who, believe it or not, used to be a professional V8 Supercar driver.
If you were to disregard GST and not apply the margin scheme on your sale, you would have to pay 1/11 of the sale price when you sell the property. So basically, you're only getting input tax credits on the construction costs and not on the land.
Where do you see the line between asset protection versus tax efficiency?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you want to have the right structures in place for all of those reasons, whether it be asset protection or tax efficiency. I wouldn't say one is more important than the other. However,
where does it go wrong for a lot of these developers when you see, they've gone belly up and it's the ATO that's wrapped them up?
It obviously depends on the type of developer that you are. And where I've seen it gone wrong in a big way is...
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Unemployable podcast. Today, we have an interesting podcast around the topic of accounting. Now, it's a dense topic, but let me tell you, we're going to try and make this as exciting as possible because we have my personal accountant here, Ashley Walsh from GJ Walsh & Co., who, believe it or not, used to be a professional V8 Supercar driver. So I don't know how one person is a race car driver to then an accountant, but he's using obviously the analytics and strategy that he's learned on the racetrack, and he's taken it into the boardroom. And I just want to say, Ashley, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here. Obviously a little bit nervous, and it's great to actually come and see the studio. You got a pretty nice setup here.
Yeah. We committed, right? We're like, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this right. Let's spend a bit of money and let's commit for us to show up every day, every week. And let's also make the guests feel special when they walk in, to actually feel like that they're being, in a professional studio. So I guess there's a couple of things. We're going to talk about structure. We're going to talk about the do's and the don'ts. We're going to talk about strategy. But one thing, especially around property, in property, the numbers don't lie, the people do, right? That is property 101. And at the end of the day, if you don't know your numbers, you're really gambling. And we see this all the time. And that is one of the reasons why we've created Unemployable Property. For those of you guys that don't know, we have a free Facebook group called Unemployable Property. We've got Shannon and Carson posting in there all the time. And we've got a couple thousand people on there now. And people posting their projects, do's and don'ts, strategies. It's just an amazing community, and it's free. So check that out on Facebook. And I just wanted to say one more thing, a little bit off topic, which was pretty cool. For those of you guys that don't know, we had Mayor Tom Tate on the podcast not long ago. And I think we launched it, I think it was last week or the week before. Yeah. And a friend of ours that was listening to the City of Gold Coast full council meeting today, that was live. It was on a Zoom. So you've got the mayor and you got his councilors and a bunch of people watching this live on Zoom. He actually promoted us today and said, hey, for those of you guys that haven't watched it, make sure you go to the Unemployable podcast and watch the podcast interview with myself and the boys at Unemployable. And then there was a photo of us with the mayor, and on the top it said the Carson Bolt podcast. So I just want to say we might, I think
I just want to say, how much did you pay?
So that was a really, really cool plug. And Carson, you're getting famous by the day.
He knows where his taxes are coming from, huh?
Yeah, that's exactly.
All those contributions.
JJ Walsh, you guys have been around for, obviously, the firm for over 30 years. You guys have 4 offices here in Southeast Queensland. But I think a question, an interesting question to start with is, how do you go from being a professional V8 Supercar race driver to then running an accounting practice to start? And then we'll dig into the depth of accounting.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not not a career change that you would see quite often. I can understand that people probably, I get the question all the time. It's like, well, how the hell do you go from driving a race car fast to getting behind a computer and driving an Excel spreadsheet and looking up tax law for a living. But like I was saying off camera to you guys before, there's a lot of crossover in terms of the analytical analysis side of it, where, you know, as a race car driver, you're always analyzing the setup of a car, data and different things, and working with an engineer, which is the side that I guess young drivers probably need to be aware that's what makes you successful as a driver. You need to be really analytical and able to analyze, self-analyze, and look at things objectively and make improvements based on it. And that's the side that I really focused in on and really enjoyed doing. And for me, accounting is similar in that it's also an analytical analysis and a job where strategy comes into play, because you're looking at structures and people's overall positions year on year, and coming up with ideas on how you can minimize taxes and basically, you know, set up structures in a way that suits them both from asset protection and tax minimization perspective. So I feel like there's a lot of crossover, even though it's not really apparent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the more you talk about it, the more the realization comes that there is a lot of similarities, really, isn't there? Accounting is one of those topics where it's boring for a lot of people, and a lot of people are like, that's not me. I'm not the numbers person, right? My accountant does that, or my business partner does that. But let me tell you one thing, right? And I'm going to look at you straight down this camera. If you're not willing to know numbers and not willing to understand accounting, I would not get into any type of business. I would not get into any type of property development. And I wouldn't leave it in the hands of your trusted advisor. Make sure that you know the ins and the outs yourself. And like they're advisors, right? At the end of the day, when you're signing the paperwork, it comes back on you, not so much on them. And in my opinion, it's one of the most important topics, right, in business that you need to know. Like, it is the scoreboard. And I know Shannon and Carson will agree with me on this. And for those of you guys that don't know who Shannon and Carson are, absolute legends. 4 years ago, they weren't doing property development. Let me tell you that. Carson was cleaning carpets, and Shannon was running an excavation business, and literally behind the wheel of the excavator. And four and a half years later, here they are today doing, a 9-figure turnover in land developments. They, accumulating over 170 lots and more. Like, every day they're doing deals and making me look like shit, to be honest with you. That's okay.
It's a crazy story. It's an unbelievable. I've been listening to the pod for a while as well, and was really inspired by it, because property's always been a bit of a passion of mine as well.
Yeah.
And to see where you guys have come from and to in such a short period of time, epic. Love it.
Yeah. It's so good, and that's why, when I met Shannon and Carson, they're just the most humble, loyal, just good all-round Aussie dudes. And I was like, man, we got to do this, because there's so many people that we can help here. And we actually have 2 of them in the studio live. We've got brothers, Matt and Adam, here. One of them lives in Victoria, and they flew up to spend the day with Shannon and Carson today. So they've been running around with meetings. They're here watching a couple podcasts, and after this, they got more meetings. So yeah, thanks for coming, guys. They're here live in studio watching, and which is a bit of a surreal moment. They were saying off camera, just because it's like you watch it and then to actually come to the studio and check it out. But for us, we were so used to it, so it's quite interesting. Sorry, didn't see you there. While you're here, actually, we've got a new coaching cohort that just opened up for the Unemployable Property Coaching Program, that you get taught on how to become a property developer. One-on-one coaching, bi-monthly coaching, and also events where we get a full coach bus with all the students and go to 6-7 different development sites. When I say development sites, from 1 lot to 10 lots to 50 lots. So you get to see exactly why we buy it, how we fund it, and also how you can do it yourself. The next day, we had an amazing event at the QT Hotel here on the Gold Coast, where we had all of our consultants come in and teach everybody on what they're looking for with sites, what are the different trends, and how you can become a property developer yourself. Now, you see me on the video, but who you're gonna be getting coached by is Shannon and Carson. Who's Shannon and Carson? 4 years ago, Carson was cleaning carpets. Shannon was a machine operator. Today, they're doing over $100 million worth of land deals. I know you're listening, and I know you want to take action. And if that's you, click on the link below or go to www.unemployableproperty.com.au and register your interest, and one of our team will reach out to you, and we'll see you on the next bus. Now get out of here. I guess what are some of the biggest misconceptions, that business owners or, property developers have about accountants, like what they do, what they don't do? Because I feel like a lot of people put, a super amount of trust into their accountants because most people don't understand the numbers.
Yeah, I think that you kind of touched on it slightly before when you were saying about take some ownership of what you're doing. That's what it comes down to ultimately. Like, you're the one leading these projects, whether it be business or property. And from the advisor's perspective, the advice that we can give is only as good as the information that we have available to us. So when it comes to making decisions, the better the information that you have and the more timely that information is, the better decisions that can be made. So I think, what you said, 100% spot on. Like, you just need to be on it and understand what you're doing. Even if you don't have a great understanding, learn, because that's how you're going to make some money.
Correct. And for those of you guys, Ashley and the team are my personal accountants. They're my business accountants. They're my accountants for all my property stuff and property structures. And to be honest with you, we probably talk 2-3 times a week.
Yeah,
minimum.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Right.
they're through certain periods, it's most days, isn't it? Really, like there's always something that comes up because obviously you got a fair bit going on now. So, it can be broad. The types of things we're talking about, whether it's a new property that you're looking at and structuring advice, or whether it's the business side and dealing with certain things on the business side as well.
And that's one thing is in accounting is structures, right? There's so many ways you can structure things. We all go to, different seminars and events, and they talk about asset protection, and then they talk about tax efficiency. So where do you see the line between, once we start really digging into the hardcore stuff, asset protection versus tax efficiency, right? Because this is the battle, right? You can go bananas on the asset protection, but then the
costs,
and we've been working through this
100%,
with all the different structures.
It's timely for you right now, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So how do you see that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you want to have the right structures in place for all of those reasons, whether it be asset protection or tax efficiency, but they're both considerations, and I wouldn't say one is more important than the other. However, you obviously want to have your business or your properties in certain structures that are going to play out over the life that you have them in the way that you expect them to from a tax perspective. And then in unforeseen circumstances, if something plays out where you're sued or something goes wrong with a business, for example, that your personal assets are separated, or your business assets, if they're you've got different businesses or properties, they're also separated from each other so that there's no crossover risk. And there's other things that come into play, like for example, stamp duty, land tax as well, if you're looking at a property perspective. So there's a lot of different considerations.
Where do the lines ever get blurred for you when people come to you for asset protection / accounting efficiency? At what point do you need to be referred over to a lawyer, or can you do some of that work?
So typically, if you're talking about asset protection and structures in that nature, I would say that a lawyer is probably better placed to give you advice on that. However, we work within, these structures every day. So we get an understanding of what certain structures are appropriate for certain situations. And obviously we have some tax law training as well. So from a tax efficiency and tax minimization perspective, we're best placed to give that advice. However, trust structures and different things that play out in trust structures, Also, asset protection. Sometimes a lawyer is more appropriate, but you probably find, and I'm sure you guys have already seen this, we work hand in hand with lawyers because where our knowledge stops, theirs starts. And there's often crossover, and often it's best to be working with them because, the whole answer takes into consideration both sides of the coin, so to speak.
Yeah, that's good. That's exactly what we did. We went to our lawyer and said we had some issues with a previous accountant, and we said, can you recommend someone, because we want you guys both looking at it with the common goal of where we want it. We want the lawyer to be looking at if things go south, he's the one who's going to be in our corner, in the courtroom potentially.
Yeah.
But at the same time, sometimes they don't always agree because you're trying to save us. If you do this way, it's 25%. If we do it this way, it's 30%.
Yeah.
And then do you want to risk? How much does that asset protection is that?
What's it going to cost me?
So it's a hard dance sometimes.
And I guess the one thing I didn't answer was there's also a cost in having all these different structures, and you can be super careful and have everything set up, and it's going to cost you an absolute arm and a leg, and is it worth it? And I guess that's a consideration that you've got to weigh up in your decision.
It's if you're using the whole web of trust structures, and then you got your bucket companies and bits and pieces, and if you're not using them correctly as a lawyer, if they're attacking that structure, they'll go back and say, okay, have you used it how you said you're going to be using? Are you actually lending it to your other entities, or are you using it as another account?
What's the form over substance? So they from a court's perspective, often they're looking at what's actually transpired in contracts and things like that versus what things say most of the time. So if things are set up to look a particular way but being used in another way, then quite often they'll look through certain things depending on certain situations and director's duties and all kinds of things.
I really want to strip it back because, believe it or not, there's a very low percentage of people in Australia that even own a trust or have a trust set up. So there's a lot of people that are going to be listening to this that don't have any of these types of structures, right? So I want to start off by asking the question, right? Like, what's the right time from an investor going, okay, I'm now not buying something in my personal name. I now have to look at structures, because the first thing people do is, how much does that cost to set up? $2,000 for this, $1,000 for that, plus compliant. I'll just put it in my own name and it's free. So where do you go from there to then going structures, right? Whether they're buying a PPR or just
So I guess there's a couple of different ways to look at it. So from an asset protection point of view, if you have a high risk job or a high risk business that you want to separate your personal assets from or your assets from being at risk, then basically you'd be looking at a trust structure to hold the property, for example, because it's not, if it's a corporate trustee, then the corporate trustee is the trustee and controls the assets, whereas if it was in an individual name, then it might be at risk. But that's not to say that it may not also be at risk in that certain situation
if it's not structured
correctly.
So basically what you're saying in layman's terms is, if you were to go buy a property and you're going to put it in your own name, and that property's $1 million, and that property's unencumbered, and you're a machine operator, as an example, and you do something wrong on the job, and there was no insurance, and that person's like, okay, well, you know what, I'm going to sue you. And they're going to go, okay, well, let's see what assets this guy owns. And all of a sudden they're going to say, oh, well, they own a nice $1 million property in,
There we go.
on the Gold Coast.
It's up for grabs.
It's up for grabs.
100%.
And that's the risk that a lot of people don't understand.
That's
I
right.
remember hearing, I don't know if it was in Australia or it was an event, and literally there was a guy on a golf course, they're golfing, and he wasn't structured properly, and he drives and he hit some guy and killed him. And the family then sued that person. He didn't have proper contents insurance for taking, the clubs out of, the home and the rest of it. And he lost like a lot,
Yeah.
just based on that. Now, that's highly unlikely event, but
but it can happen.
These things do happen. So instead of you worrying about spending the $2,000 or $3,000 up front, right, you got to think about these things long term and making sure that you're protected.
Yeah.
And another thing is, right, companies and trusts, they have to be set up properly as well. But again, let's strip it back one more time. What is a trust? And when you're talking about a trust and corporate trustee versus a company. So if you break down a trust first, because most people will then go and own.
I'll just circle back.
Go circle back again. Like, so let's talk to the people that are like, well, I just know stuff in my own name.
So the second part to that is the second reason somebody might look at a trust or a company structure, or more likely a trust if they're going to own a property, rather than having it in their own name, is if they already own property in their own name. So there's a $600K tax-free threshold for land tax in Queensland for an individual. A trust or a company has a $350K tax-free threshold in Queensland. So if, for example, you own a property where the land value is greater than $600K in your own name, and then you go and buy another property, you're going to start paying land tax. But if you go and buy that property in a trust, you get asset protection. Say you've got a corporate trustee, for example, you got asset protection, and then also you get another $350K in tax-free threshold from a land tax perspective. So there's a double benefit there. So that's when you really start looking at it, is when you might already own it in one name, and you're like, okay, well, I want to be saving some dollars here. How can I do it? That's a way to save some dollars.
Mm.
Are you setting up some of these structures for your clients ahead of time, so they've got something sitting there for when the property comes along, or would you rather wait until you see what it's going to be? Because obviously you get to go to contract, you need the entity, but so for speed of trying to get a deal done, you want it done. Maybe then I'm sure you also like, well, let's just wait and see what the deal looks like before we advise.
Yeah, 100%. Horses for courses when it comes to this stuff. I guess it really depends. There's so many things that come into play with property, because it depends on how it's being funded, who's involved. Is there anyone coming in after the fact? You really need to make a decision based on your best knowledge of what's going to play out as close to the time as when you want to pull the trigger, because that's going to be the most appropriate knowledge that you've got at the time to make the right decision. And you also really need to think about, okay, well, what are we going to be doing here? Is anything likely to change? Is there going to be other parties coming into play? Is there stamp duty issues that may come up? What do we do? Is it a trust, or is it a company, or is it me personally?
Can you break down the difference between a discretionary trust, a unit trust, and a hybrid trust, if you've done any of those?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess going back to what's a trust?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, let's start with what's a trust, and then.
Yeah, a trust is essentially a legal document that gets put in place, a legal structure where you're able to hold something in trust, and basically it's separated. There's a separation of I guess the asset, if it's owned by a company, a corporate trustee, for example, from the individual, and the trust is able to, if it's a discretionary trust, you're able to make year on year by resolution, you're able to distribute profits from the trust based on a resolution that you make every year around prior to 30 June. Whereas if it's a unit trust, it's a little bit like a company where you have units versus shares. So you have units in a unit trust, and it's a fixed entitlement as opposed to a non-fixed entitlement in a discretionary trust. So a unit trust is good where you've got unrelated parties. It's also good for borrowing as well, because lenders like to see fixed entitlement to certain things so that they can assess serviceability and things like that. And then obviously the company is similar in that it's also a fixed entitlement. But the main difference between a unit trust and a discretionary trust is the entitlement is fixed in a unit trust, and in a discretionary trust, every year you've got the discretion to distribute profits based on resolution made by trustee.
So how you see fit, you can distribute it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, within the bounds of the legal document, which is the trust deed. So the trust deed basically sets out the rules for distribution of income and capital of the trust, and basically you can, within the rules of that, distribute income, and within the rules of the tax law as well. And then a hybrid trust is a partially fixed trust within the trustee. You also have some ability to make discretionary distributions as well. Typically, lenders don't like seeing hybrid trusts, though. So some of you might have found that out.
Just the name, hybrid.
Yeah,
It just sounds like you could do whatever.
You just do whatever you want. Yeah.
It's funny. We did a unit trust not that long ago, and I think a lot of accountants just do 100 units just because it's a nice, easy number. And then there was 2 of us, and then we wanted to make it 3, and 100 doesn't go into 3, and we had to
you need to.
We were screwed. So we had to come up. We had actually.
Usually they go 120 because
That's right.
120 is divisible by a number of ways. So
yeah, we've learned that lesson now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're saying distribution in a trust, right? So why wouldn't you just buy it in a company rather than buying it in a trust?
So I guess so it depends on what we're talking about.
Yep.
If we're talking about property development,
Yep.
The issue that you've got with a company in property development is if you retain property and it's on capital account, so you're renting out a property and then later on you sell that property, the property, the capital gain in a company isn't able to be discounted. So there's no general discount from a capital gains perspective in a company. Whereas in a trust, basically you can apply the capital gains discount, and when you distribute the income to whoever the beneficiaries are, you can apply that discount at a beneficiary level as well. So there's potentially some tax savings there, and that's why depending on what you're doing, trusts and companies can be more appropriate. So for example, if you're a property developer that's on revenue account and you're running a property development business, that's revenue account versus capital, and basically you would look to go company or trust depending on whether you wanted to retain property in the trust. When I say retain, I mean rent it out and it becomes a capital item.
Hold the asset.
Hold the asset. Yeah.
And these are all the questions that most people don't know to ask, right? So when you're saying it's good if you know the full story, a lot of people don't understand a lot of this, and that's why it's so important.
All plans change.
Yeah, correct, right? And it's so important to make sure that you do have trusted advisors around you, because it can cost you a shit ton of money moving forward and a lot of stress, especially when you're going to business with people and you're doing JVs and you're setting up unit trusts and these types of things, and then all of a sudden somebody wants out, and what does that look like?
Yeah.
It could really throw a spanner in the works, Now, you mentioned before land tax, and this is another area where I think a lot of people get confused on how it works and what it is. So can you explain a little bit to the audience what land tax is, how it works, and go through those thresholds again? Because I mean, Shannon, Carson, and I, and a lot of people that are in the development space know land tax really, really well.
Yeah. So I guess land tax is from a developer's perspective probably the worst tax that exists. But I think I'm a little unsure of the actual tax rate, and it changes state to state.
Yeah.
But the way that it works is essentially your land value is based on your dutiable value that's set by your council. You get your letter every year and it says whatever the amount is, and they basically calculate your land tax based on whether a property is, what's the purpose of you holding this property? Is it a business? Is it commercial land? Or is it your primary place of residence? Is it farmland? Is there exemptions that can apply? For example, in farmland or your primary place of residence, you can have exemptions apply for land tax. Whereas, if you're an investor and you're just holding it as a rental property, then the land tax would apply on a property. So, first of all, obviously they look at the value of the the name on the title is what they're looking at. How much land does this particular person own? Is there land tax that should be levied on it? Is there an exemption that applies?
Land tax gets missed a lot because people that haven't owned multiple properties, they don't understand how land tax works. So one thing I'd highly recommend for anyone that doesn't understand it is do a little bit of research around it and make sure that when you're doing your feasibilities and whatnot, that you have that land tax component in there, because depending on the size of the land and the value of the land, obviously the value of the land, it can really
Can add up
a very, very high cost that you cannot get away from.
But
like,
particularly if you don't get your structuring right, like if you go and buy a property in your own name and you don't think about it, and you're like, yet this land tax assessment turns up in July, and you're like, oh no, didn't think about that, and you end up with this with these big bills that you can't get rid of because you can't just buy and sell property willy nilly, So if you make the wrong decision when you're first structuring, often you got to live with it.
Yeah, and it's as of June 30, right? So it's one of those things where, like, we're building a place at the moment. So obviously we have a PPR, and we're moving into a new place that is going to be the new PPR. But as of June 30, it's still not our primary place of residence. But even if you moved in July 2nd, as an example, there's no discount. Right, you are still, so if that's $25,000 in land tax, and you move in a day after June 30th, you're still paying the full $25,000. They don't amortize it. They don't go, okay, 25,000 divided by 365 times 1. It's literally you're paying the full pot. Right. So you have to make sure
at that point in time.
Yeah, at that point in time. And these are the things when you're buying.
Yeah.
Right, and you're thinking about contract dates. You're thinking about settlement. All these things.
How's the cash flow?
How's the cash flow going to work? Because let me tell you, if you can, settle before that time, well, the land tax is going to be on the current owner, not on you.
Yeah,
and that can make a big difference depending on the type of land that you're buying.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like that's why a lot of developers, they're like, well, we'll change the price, but you have to settle on this date.
Yes,
a lot of people coming in wouldn't even know that's the reason why. Yeah, they just don't want to get hit.
I mean, like, giving you an example, Shannon and Carson, like, you guys are doing big land developments, right? So give me an example of a larger scale development that you're doing and what a land tax bill would be, so people can understand the significance of what land tax is.
We're working backwards off one at the moment.
Yeah,
we are actually adjusting the land, so we're working backwards towards it still being farming property and being used for primary producing. But how much was that one that come in initially?
We got another one because they assumed that we were overseas foreign investors. So the land tax bill was like $120,000. So I just about had freaked out when I opened up the letter, and I was like, that's why I don't open letters for like months. Shit till I get bills like those. So I freaked out and just rang up my lawyer. So what the heck's going on here? He's like, no, that's not right. We'll sort it out. But it's still big numbers, like $25,000, and if it was primary producer, we might get it for nothing or very low. But it was like the big numbers when you're not expecting them, and you're not used to the land tax side of things. It's on top of all the rest.
Yeah.
So,
and if you look in the detail, like, they say that land tax is even more when you have a podcast named after your first name. So you're screwed now, because with the Carson Bull podcast, I think it's an extra 30% there, right?
But that's why people sell sites as well, because their land tax goes through the roof, especially if they got prime sites that have had them for 30, 40 years, or they inherit them. It's the land tax that kills a lot of the people where they just like, they would like to hold it, but the land tax just slaughters them.
Yeah, 100%.
How should developers be looking at structuring with JVs? Because again, with what the boys have been teaching in the Unemployable Property Program, for those of you guys that don't know, Unemployable Property has a coaching program helping people on how to do these types of deals. And there's a lot of JVs happening, right? Shannon and Carson have done JVs. I collaborate in everything that I do. And joint ventures, again, is a thing where we teach, like, idea, capital, execution, this ICE model, right? Some people might have the idea, which is the piece of land, but they have no money. Some people might have the cash, but they don't have the land. And one person might have the project management experience and not have the cash or the land, right? So you're kind of splitting this up, going,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'll put in the cash and I'll take X amount in this.
Yeah. What's your part of the process, I guess?
Yeah,
You
correct.
kind of answered your own question.
Yeah.
In that, in a JV, obviously they're taxed separately, and it's an agreement that I'm going to bring the land, or I'm going to bring the expertise, or whatever your part in the JV might be, unless it's a partnership. But in a way, if one party holds the land and one party is just providing services, project management or something like that, the type of structure is different for each party, and what's appropriate for each party depending on what your role is. So it depends on how you're going to be receiving income, what income are you going to be receiving, and then, okay, well, what's the appropriate structure for that?
Yeah, because with joint ventures, it's quite tricky, especially trying to work out, the percentages, right? Whether you're buying in a trust and that's units, or a company and it's shares, it's really working out what that looks like. Now, I want to ask Shannon and Carson, because they've done a lot of different JVs, and there's going to be a lot of people watching this and a lot of people in the community that are doing JVs, and some might be bringing the cash, some might be bringing the deal. How do you guys manage the expectations on going, what is it actually worth? How much is the money worth versus the deal versus the executor? How do you guys actually manage that? I know you're not doing as many JVs now, but you've done plenty of JVs in the past. And how did you manage that? And how would you recommend people watching this manage that? Like Matt and Adam, as an example, they might find a property and they need, to find the cash, and they're like, okay, well, is it worth 20%? Is it 10? Is it 30? Is it 40?
And were you doing JVs separately in separate entities, or were you doing them where you're, partial equity owners? How were you guys structuring them? Was there, I guess you probably had them different for each project, right? But you might have seen both sides of the coin.
Yeah, when we started, we had no experience. So I'll tell the story where I forgot about the GST in my feasibility initially. And so my percentages went down. And, at that point, I looked at it as, instead of going to uni and paying $60,000, $100,000, I was happy with getting a 20%, I think actually there was a 15% cut of a deal that I had no experience doing. So put yourself in the shoes of the person coming in. She was like, she'd just come out of a bad joint venture where things had gone south. The person had pitched it, said, we're going to get 7 lots. 2 weeks after they settled, actually, there was a big easement through the middle of it. And she didn't do her homework. And all of a sudden, it's 5 lots. And it was, she had to take over the deal. So she had just come out of that. And I was as raw and as she could tell by my 4-line feasibility, pay this, I think it costs that, profit here. And so I just said, look, at the end of the day, how about I be a project manager, and you can sack me at any point, and if I'm terrible, we agree on the spotter's fee, where you pay me for finding that. So for her, there was no risk for her coming in. And then from there, we evolved into joint ventures. So a lot of the time, we weren't on title because I didn't have any serviceability. I was to detriment to the project to actually be on title. So we'd sit in the back of the trust deed and in the actual joint venture itself. Which
you have a joint venture agreement as well.
Yeah, separate joint venture agreement. So.
Hey guys, this is Perry from Unemployable Media. Just wanted to send a shout out from Thailand for Ashley and his team at GJ Walsh. They've been incredible when it comes down to accounting and all the financing we need for our businesses and other businesses that we work. Now they've opened up their doors and let us know that if anyone who's watching this right now is interested to get finance or accounting advice, check the pinned comment below and see how they can help you. Stay unemployable. Go check out unemployableproperty.com.au/GJ Walsh and have a chat with Ashley and his team today.
We had those set up, and that's kind of how we started. The splits obviously come to you, experience what you're bringing to the table. Like we were also doing the civil construction at cost, so we were adding value there. We weren't just managing the project. So so we're bringing a bit to a table. When I say we, I mean Shannon. But we were I guess coming in now, I think if you're green and it's your first project, it's just being realistic with, and it's also how much profit's in the deal. Because if the person's coming in and they're putting in $1 million into the deal, they can park their money with no risk somewhere else. So it's me looking at them saying, okay, a lot of our deals, they're getting between a 50 and 100% return on their cash, per annum, essentially. Like that's how it works out to. It's not locked in, return, but that's kind of where it can wash out for a low level deal. So the risk versus reward's got to be there. So if it's a highly profitable deal, like some of our deals now that have got a lot of profit into it, they're still getting an amazing return on a lesser percentage. So it's just looking at the deal in isolation, risk versus reward. What are you bringing to the table? Because a lot of people that are doing project management, you've got to be careful when you're going to these more sophisticated things. You would have seen it as well. They've got a spotter's fee built into it. They've got a massive development management fee built into it. And then at the end, the project makes 20%. It was actually a 40% deal, but they've clicked the ticket all the way in, and then you're getting a 50% return. But the developer's already made 20% on all the ways he's clicked all the way through. So
that's experience, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you're coming in funding the deals, make sure you're looking at those kind of things as well, and make sure that the risk versus rewards there for everyone, and it's what two people agree to at the end of the day. Was there anything you'd add to that you said?
No, 100% agree with what you're saying. Just know what you're getting yourself into, and have those conversations up front before you get to a point where you start seeing these kinds of fees getting taken out and you go, I don't remember reading that.
We always kept it very lean as well. We didn't have project management fees. We were just a working party.
So you
paid along
more
the way,
looking at what's the payoff going to be once we dispose of this thing. There
was actual costs and actual realisation that we separated at the end.
I mean, as much as we discussed this on the podcast, guys, this is just general in nature, right? This isn't any type of financial advice. But I would definitely, one of the top things I would do before anything is find or sit down with a trusted advisor, accountant, tell them your scenario, and structure and potential. So that way you can go in with your eyes open, right? Spend a little bit of money up front, get the advice. So that way, scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, whether you're JVing one person or two people, and what that looks like, and what that looks like for your own personal tax structure. Because in this country, we've got to be very strategic with tax. Like no matter what, we're paying tax, and that's fine. And that's part of what we need to pay to live in a beautiful country like Australia, and we definitely all pay for it. But again, there's a lot of efficient ways, like again, this is CGT exemptions and these types of things that can add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, on some of these types of developments.
And even like as simple as doing a small splitter and getting the main residence exemption wrong along the way, where you might sell a block of land thinking that you're going to get the main residence exemption and you've got no dwelling on it, and you get hit with tax because the ATO is like, no, sorry, can't do that.
Do you have any recommendations for someone? I know quite a few developers that have actually done a joint venture with a landowner. So you don't have all the stamp duty costs coming in, and it can be a lot more efficient, but a lot of developers aren't thinking about the actual owner themselves and how that the tax implications for them. So what's the best way to, let's say hypothetically there's a 30-lot subdivision, and Bill wants to stay in his house. We're going to carve him off a little 600 square meter block, and we're going to subdivide around him. Is there a way where he's not going to get slaughtered on tax to set something like that up?
There was actually a recent case on this one. I can't remember exactly what the name of the case was, but it was exactly those sort of facts where a developer had come in, and it might have been a land subdivision, but basically there was minimal development work actually done, and it was all outsourced to a developer that was project managing. This particular developer had chased this guy over a number of years. The person had turned down developers for a number of years, eventually pulled the trigger with this one particular project, and basically had next to no involvement in it. And I believe, I believe what actually happened was the ATO had treated it as the mere realization of an asset, and it was held on capital account. I think the ATO had challenged it in the court and maybe lost recently, but I'd only read that very recently, but I think in that situation, it's a great result for the taxpayer or for the person that owns it, because you're not going to get hit with all these additional costs and taxes that you're going to have to pay, and you're getting discounts and different things, exemptions that can apply from a capital gains perspective, because if it's held on revenue account, then it's likely that you're going to be hit with a little more tax.
Is there a way, if you're doing a development, say the same scenario, but we're coming in and buying that same piece of parcel, 30 lots, but that house Shannon wants to retain as his personal place of residence, is there a way of doing the development in an entity and then Shannon retaining that without paying double stamp duty? Like, is there a way of structuring, or do you need to actually...
I heard you guys talk about this actually, and I actually haven't seen this play out in practice. But I believe that, it's more of a legal question, to be honest. And I think that's to do with the way that the trusts operate. And I think it could be in Victoria where there's some rules around how that could play out, and a distribution of land to a particular person on disposal of a property. But to be honest, I don't actually know myself. But I do. It piqued my interest when I heard you talk about that, and I started to look into it, but didn't go too far down the rabbit hole. Yeah. So I don't have a great answer for you, but yeah, I mean, that would be a great result if you could get it. Yeah,
that's good.
I want to touch on GST in property development, and no one better to know this than Carson with his initial F up in regards to one of their initial deals. Basically forgot to put in the GST, which reduced obviously the margin on the project, and I think they were on some kind of split, and which means he had to reduce the amount that he made and Shannon made based on that mistake. And this is and it's interesting, like but again, right, this is after doing a course, this is after going to events, this is after networking and schmoozing, and probably after that kind of going, I'm a developer now.
What happens to we win and lose together?
Problem is my eyes glazed over when the accountant section came on in the course, and I was like, after lunch
and this is the thing, right? It is so important. Like I'm the analytical guy, like I'm crossing T's, I'm dotting I's, making sure, like, what are we missing, add that in, add this in. Because the last thing you want is surprises, right? And GST is one of those things that I think people get confused with GST on property, and because when you buy your first property and it's under your personal name and it's your PPR, there's no GST. You know what I mean? You buy it, you live in it,
there's no interest.
You sell it,
yeah.
There's no capital gains tax because it's your primary place of residence. You go and do it again, and you're in this world of just your kind of PPR world.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you go and you buy a block of land, and you're going to build a duplex on it, right? Or do a splitter or subdivide it into land. And all of a sudden you're now selling.
There's a
retail
profit making.
A profit making exercise. And now you're selling, like, there's no difference selling a house from a development than it is me selling this hat online and having to charge you GST.
There is a difference.
It's a big it's a huge difference. It's a big dollar. It's a big dollar difference.
And it doesn't even pass through your account.
Yeah, exactly. So that's another thing, right? So let's unpack GST on property development in a very, very basic form. So let's look at
like that's such a broad.
It is, but let's look at it from a duplex, right? So let's wrap, just so people can wrap their head around GST, and then we'll talk about margin scheme, because margin scheme is still confusing even for developers that have done it over and over and over again. So you buy a block of land for $1 million. There's a house on it, right? You then go and put a DA and go, all right, it's in median density, I'm gonna turn it into a duplex. You bought it for $1 million. You've incurred, a couple $100,000 in costs. You're in for 1.2. You knock down the house, you build, the build costs you 1.5. You then go, so you're in for 2.7, give or take, everybody follow slowly. And you go and you sell each side for 2 million, right? $4 million. How does the GST work in that component? Where is there GST? Where is there not GST?
Yeah, so in that situation where you're buying it and there's no taxable supply in the original purchase, and you don't have an entitlement
that's the original million.
Yeah, the original purchase.
Yeah.
So you're buying it where there's no taxable supply. There's no entitlement to income tax. To
GST.
input tax credits.
Okay. Yeah.
To GST input tax credits, which is basically you claiming a credit back for GST that was paid. You're basically having to apply if you want to get when you develop the property and you knock it over, and you substantially renovate it, it then becomes what's called new residential, and what you're selling is a taxable supply in the end. So for you to be able to not pay, if you were to disregard GST and not apply the margin scheme on your sale, you would have to pay 1/11 of the sale price when you sell the property. So basically, you're only getting input tax credits on the construction costs and not on the land that you originally purchased.
Yeah.
But when you apply what's called the margin scheme, you're able to basically, when you sell it, you make an election in your contract, and you basically get the buying party to agree to apply the margin scheme as well, and you're able to offset the proceeds by the sale price of the land, and basically pay GST on the margin between the two.
So let's work
in
it
a
out.
simple context. That's sort of how it works.
Yeah. So if you didn't do the margin scheme as an example, you've just sold 2 pieces of stock for $2 million each. That's $4 million. You divide that by 1.10. That's going to give you the GST component of that $4 million that you got to remit back.
You got to pay to the ATO,
right? So that comes
in your
straight
banks.
off the top. This is what Carson forgot about, right? So he's like, I'm selling it for $4 million, right? And if you take the $4 million as an example, right, and you do that calculation, right? So if you go 4 million divided by 1.10, it's $363,000.
Yeah.
Right. So here's Carson thinking, I've just sold this thing and I've made $500,000. Actually, no, he hasn't. He's made $137,000 because he's just forgotten about this GST as an example.
And in that situation, you see it time and time again where people don't apply the margin scheme, and basically the profit in the project is completely wiped out. Because quite often that is the profit. It's very close to the profit.
Now, the margin scheme, just to make that clear, is going, if I paid $1 million for that land and the sale was 4 million, you take the $1 million off the 4 and you're only paying GST on the 3.
On the difference, on the margin.
But you have to have that in the contract as you're buying it, or else.
There's an election basically to make to apply the margin scheme, and certain situations, a buyer may or may not want to apply the margin scheme. So, for example, if you're selling residential land to somebody who's going to live in that land or who's going to put a house on that land themselves, and they're not going to claim any input tax credits, then they don't have any issue in applying the margin scheme because they're not entitled to claiming any input tax credits. So there's no benefit in them not applying the margin scheme. Whereas if you sold it to a developer who potentially wants to, to somebody who wants to claim input tax credits, then they may not want to go into the margin scheme because they may want to claim the GST on the purchase.
Now, another question I have around GST is buy and hold, right? Now, you pay the GST if you sell, right? But what happens if you hold? So let's go back to that scenario. I've now got two $2 million properties on that one block of land now. I've refinanced it, right? I've got renters in there and I keep it. So I'm not paying any GST to anyone because I haven't sold anything yet, right? If I keep it for 5, 6, 7 years, as an example, and then I sell it, how does the GST work?
So there's a 5-year rule basically on the GST. So where if and I want to get this right, but
Yeah, you're right.
so the GST, if once it becomes residential rental,
Mhm.
if that's what we're talking about, residential rental, it would be input taxed, and basically there's no GST on the property. But for example, where it's new residential, there's a 5-year rule where if you rented it out for say 3 years, and as a developer then sold it, there could be some there could still be an obligation to pay GST on the sale.
Correct.
There would be still an obligation to pay GST on the sale. So,
But if you held it for longer than 5 years,
then it's more likely that you won't have to pay GST on the sale.
So,
But
and again,
there's
this
certain
isn't
criteria
advice.
you've got to
correct.
Yeah.
But the reason why I'm asking this question is I'm in a very buy and hold pattern at the moment.
Yeah.
Because of like a mentor of mine basically goes, all right, so if I don't sell, I'm not paying agents fees and I'm not paying GST. Now, when you start thinking about the bigger the asset, and this is what we've been talking about, like these guys with the land that they're doing, right? Retaining, building on it, retain, refinance. And I've been, my mentor, right, was telling me going, okay, well, you do the calcs. Let's go back to the $4 million properties. So you got two $2 million duplexes, right? There's $363,000 in GST you need to pay if you sell. Again, not financial advice, depending on certain criteria, right? Cover Ashley's ass here. Right? 5 years, that was $363,000. To sell that $4 million property, you're going to be paying minimum, we'll call it 2% commission. Okay. So that's 80 grand plus easy 10K per property for marketing. That's 100 grand. So that's 463,000. Now we're talking. If you hold that property for 5 years, right, that is $92,600 a year that you are saving by not selling. That is going directly into your pocket if you meet certain criteria, yada 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 yada.
There's also other things that come into play too, like where you're holding property in a trust or personally. There's negative gearing and things like that where you can receive income tax benefits over time as well if it is negatively geared.
We don't talk about negatively geared on this podcast. No, I'm joking. I'm just joking. But again, retaining some of these things are negatively geared, But when you start looking at things and going, yes, it's negatively geared by 20 grand a year, as long as you can service those loans, right? That's 100 grand over 5 years it's costing you.
Yeah.
You're getting a bit of a cost benefit from that from a tax perspective.
Yeah.
But you're still $363,000 ahead by not selling it.
Yeah, which
so
is
sometimes you got to
profit on your next project.
Well, but again, when I start thinking about things, and it depends on people's risk tolerances, and I've got mentors that are doing this, and they're literally not selling, but what they're doing is, in 5 years' time, or in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, in 4 years, they reval.
Yeah.
As long as you have the serviceability coming in, or you have the relationships with the banks and the private lenders and the rest of it, they're just refinancing back out of it and going again. But guess what? You're actually accessing money, not paying tax because you haven't sold it, not paying the GST because you haven't sold it. Because you got to remember, when you sell, it's not just the GST you're paying. It's not just the marketing fees and agents fees you sell. There's a tax that you need to pay as well, because that income's got to be distributed through the trust to you and your family and the rest of it.
Yeah.
So when you start doing those calculations long term, they're astounding. People are working every day, right, 5 days a week to earn $100,000 a year.
Yeah,
that's the reality.
But like I said, we've just started thinking about it as well, and one of the biggest reasons we didn't do it is because we wanted to be as liquid as possible to get into the next deal.
Yeah.
But we've also realized now, because we don't have the serviceability, none of our deals are done with our serviceability at all. It's all been private money, or if we need serviceability, that's when we'll go get a joint venture party. But we've also worked out quickly now, we want our money working for us instead of sitting in the bank. So we might buy something cash, for example, and then when we need it, some of that, to go settle the next property, we know we can make it 70% liquid, based on the valuation. A private guy will come in and at 11%, let us pull that out, and do our deal. And
Yeah.
so we're starting to think, oh, maybe we need to we're more liquid than we think by doing this. And you got to be very careful because a lot of people get slaughtered using private money for sure. So you got to know, you got to have a bit of strategy around what you're doing. But especially in the built form space, like with land, it's a little bit tricky because then you got to go through the build, and you're holding like units. It's a no brainer.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Quite often people are doing both. Like it's it's not good to do one or the other completely exclusively, right? You can sort of diversify the way that you're doing things and take advantage of different situations, and it gives you the ability to pivot and change your decisions and structures and assets that you're holding depending on what's actually playing out in the broader economy.
Just on that same scenario with the 2 duplexes that Eric has and he's selling for $2 million each, and where are we at? 2.7 in total cost.
We were at 1.5, about 2.7.
2.7 plus GST if you sell, plus agent fees. Say he sells one before June 30 and the next one is not, he hasn't sold it yet, or it's going to sell in the next financial year. And what sort of profit are you up for? Say 800,000.
Yeah, give or take on that scenario.
On that scenario, at 800,000 a profit roughly. What's his tax obligation? Because he's still in the hole from the first one prior to June 30.
So in this situation, are we talking about something that's being held for that's on capital account, or we're talking about a developer that's holding it as trading stock, or
developer holding it as trading stock? He sold one before June 30. He's still at a cost of 2.7 million on the project, and he's only sold one unit for 2 million.
Yeah, so
hasn't sold the second just yet.
So essentially, with the way that the trading stock works, is you're basically you're reducing your trading stock on hand, I guess, at that point in time when you make the sale prior to June 30 for that particular one, which essentially the way that it works is you end up with a profit based on that particular sale. You pay tax, for example, if it's a company, you pay tax at your 25 or 30%, depending on what kind of entity you are, and base rate entity or not. And basically it brings it to account. And then
he hasn't made any actual profit yet, nor repaid the total debt on it, because he's only sold the one unit, but you're up for a tax liability.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's right. Managing cash flow and timing these things is always critical. So, it goes back to basically looking at what's my plan and how is it going to work? How's the cash flow going to work? Can we make it happen? And not just making a decision because somebody's offered you what you think is a good deal.
We got caught with that. We literally thought, well, we haven't made any profit yet. We're not paying any tax because I still got 5 blocks before I've still got 2 more before I'm in the green. But no, you're still proportionally paying your tax on the other blocks that you sold. And we're like, what? Made any money yet?
We're still borrowing money at 12%.
No cash.
Still borrowing money at 12%, getting hammered by interest, and then the tax bill comes in at the same time.
So with all the tax bills that are coming in, it's fun. Where does it go wrong for a lot of these developers when you see, they've gone belly up and it's the ATO that's wrapped them up? Because a lot of the time they make a chunk of money and they get excited, and we made 100,000 on this one, and we're going to make $1 million on that one, and you have another win, and now we're going, there's a $10 million deal. And sometimes a lot of people, it's like you get that $700,000 profit, you got multiple deals, and you just throw it straight over into the next deal to prop that one up. You haven't paid the tax there, and then it all comes crashing down.
It's like a deck of cards.
Where do you see it go wrong for developers in particular?
It obviously depends on the type of developer that you are, and where I've seen it gone wrong in a big way is a friend of mine was a builder developer, and basically getting tied up, having cash tied up in multiple projects, and then having the bank not release funds and not being able to pay your bills, pay your subbies, pay whoever you got to pay. You get tied up, you can't pay your bills, and you end up going bankrupt because you've got all this debt, and the banks just come knocking. They see blood in the water. As soon as they see blood in the water, they're going to come after you, and they're going to try and recover their money. And once they start doing that, you're buggered.
Especially with built form stuff, like at the end of the day, they need to be paid, right? Like if your subbies aren't paid, they're not coming to site. And if you're relying on bank claims coming in, the bank claim, they're going to send in the QS, and they're going to go, okay, is this fitted up? No, you're missing a shower screen here, you're missing 2 robes here, oh, that carpet is not fit. Oh, you're not getting your fit off claim, right? But 90% of it's done. Can I get 90%? No. I want, you know, you need to finish 100%. And then all of a sudden, if you don't have enough funds to pay though, and that exactly, a lot of people get caught out that way. That's why, you know, you should always have, in my opinion, you know, some surplus cash for those rainy days, for the just in case. You can't just rely on the banks for everything and private money for everything. And you've got, you know, $5,000 in your bank account, hoping that, you know,
praying for it all goes smoothly.
all you know, all these ducks line up in a row, because at times it's not going to happen. And especially now when people are getting smart with, you know, importing in these different things, all good. The banks don't care. They're not going to give you the money so you can go and import material so you can save 20-30%. Like, you're going to be funding that stuff yourself up front. And then you're going to be getting that on the bank claim months and months later.
And you know what? That goes back to that whole cash flow and coming up with a detailed plan. Because if you don't have a detailed plan on the different scenarios that can play out, you're never going to be protected. You're gonna find yourself in these positions where something's going to happen and you're going to try and scramble, and you may get it right a few times, but you're going to come unstuck somewhere along the way if you continue to do that.
Is that something that people can engage you with, to actually sit down and say, hey, can you help me, you know, project this out, have a look at what I'm thinking, where have I got wrong? Hang on, you haven't allocated some stuff over here. Sitting down and going across your
talk to your accountant about it for sure. I think it's something that you want to be across yourself. So you want to prepare it yourself, do your feasibility and different scenarios, your risk and, you know, your range of your risk. What happens if we get this price? What happens if these costs go up by blah, 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 and look at the different ways that the deal might play out if certain scenarios play out. And then sit down with your accountant and say, what am I missing? Is there anything that I haven't done properly yet? Am I missing GST? Am I calculating something the wrong way? Is this the way that it's going to play out? What do you think? And quite often, you know, the accountant's going to be able to just look at it objectively and just sit down and review what you've done and say, okay, well, hold on, this isn't quite right, or this, have you thought about this or that? And just having a second set of eyes and putting two heads together is going to be obviously better than one. And having an accountant is going to be able to look at the tax implications of what you're doing as well, and that side of it.
One of our recent lessons is one you've just mentioned, actually, with unfixed items. So we're obviously in the civil construction space and done a lot of private lending and whatnot now, and we've never had a hold on civil products being delivered to site. Once they're ordered on site, you can claim a portion of that claim to cover the cost. With a lender we're with now, with a big bank lender, and that's one of the boxes you have to tick with them. They will not pay for unfixed items that aren't in the ground, installed and done. So fortunately, we carry enough. We're holding about $500,000 worth of stock that's sitting on site. That's not.
That's a big hole in the cash flow budget, isn't it?
The bank wouldn't fund that.
And those are the little things that you got to look at, right? Like, all good, you're with the big four banks and you're saving the, you know, 4%, 5%, and that's fine. But again, if you don't have that cash flow and you still want to do the project, you just got to make sure that you build that into the fee zone, going, okay, where am I going to get that extra $500,000? And if it is going to be from a private lender or mezz or whatever it is, that's fine, but you're not going to be paying 12s and 13s for it. That's going to be at a higher dollar amount, and you build that into your fee zone and take that lending, because if you don't have it, you're going to be caught out here, and then you're going to be knocking on someone's door going, and I'll be like, yeah, that's fine. I'll give you the money, right? With a caveat over the property and at a ridiculous rate, and you've got no choice, right? Unless you got good mates around you that can help out. I wouldn't do that to these guys, but, you know, hopefully they'd bail me out and I would bail them out within reason. But it's like,
it all sneaks up on you. There's bonds, Energex bonds,
well, especially with with what you got, like that large land like
the bigger you get, the easier it is to go down on those kinds of things, right? Because the bigger the numbers that you're talking about, they get tied up.
Just retention as well, and some of just your claim retentions, they're quite large numbers by the end.
So it's always good to have these contingencies in place. But what I like about you, Ashley, is, you know, I've been working with you and Kevin for many years now, and, you know, getting you guys in a room and bouncing off each other
Yeah.
Because you guys are two very different people.
Yeah. 100%.
And it's great because you'll be like, oh, we could do this and we could do that. And then Kevin's like, well, you're not thinking about this. And how about this and about this? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. And then, yeah, actually, you challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because again, it is in certain areas are quite gray.
Yeah.
Can you do this? Can't you do this? How does that work? How does this work? And it all depends on how it's structured up front. So my recommendation, I know Shannon and Carson would be saying this as well, is anyone listening to this, if you're new and you're learning, spend a little bit of money, sit down with a lawyer, sit down with an accountant, work out structure, map out a plan. Is this something that you're just doing for some cash flow on the side and you're keeping your day job and it's chunk deals that you're building your equity in? Do you want to quit your job? And is this something you want to be doing full time? Because let me tell you, I know what these guys are doing and this is what they're doing full time, but there's a long time between drinks.
Oh yeah.
Right. So you have to make sure where's right. Who's paying the rent? Who's paying the mortgage? Who's putting the food on the table? Right. Happy wife, happy life.
And how long did it take you guys before you actually got to the point where you were comfortable enough to have enough cash there and know that the next deal is going to be coming and possibly coming off? Was it like, okay, well, I've got like 3 deals in the bank and I know that I can withhold a bad deal next time and I'm still comfortable enough to be not going to work and getting a steady paycheck?
We when we first started, we were already doing projects while both in full-time jobs.
Yeah.
So we were burning the wick at both ends.
Yeah.
Burn the candle at both ends until we got to a point where, well, Carson jumped first until we got to a point where we actually had a couple of projects ready for construction.
Yeah.
So we worked right up to that point that we owned and done the DD, ready to settle and actually build and start selling these properties before we properly made the jump.
Yeah.
We're also it's not getting too greedy because it's really easy to just see the next deal and be like, no, we actually like to have a bit of cash reserves before, because we're still learning now. Like we're still like unfixed items that's a $500,000 creep.
Yeah.
So you can't be like, oh, this is the next deal. So we'd rather go, okay, we're pretty tight. Like we've got some cash to run the projects, but let's do this one as a joint venture. Someone else can fund it. They get 50%. We'll run the whole project, and I sleep so much easier at night knowing we haven't stretched too far.
Yeah.
So
you've still got some cash coming in, but you haven't got, you're not leveraged to the eyeballs going, if we don't make this work, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to sell my house. But
it's crazy. Like we've got the best part of $20 million in debt right now at private money.
Yeah.
Like big dollars. Yeah. But we sleep pretty easily because we're in and out of projects within 12 months. There's a really clear pathway on how we're getting out of them.
We know the assets we're buying them really well.
Yeah.
As well, there is.
You're confident in your DD.
So they have the key is they have a strategy, right?
Yeah.
And that's what people need is a strategy, not just a shotgun approach, going, just going, yeah, I'm just going to do this one because there's money, and then I want to do this one because there's money in it. Like, why? Ask the question, why? What is it that you want out of property development, right?
Yeah, and they've got a product that they know that they can reproduce.
And the relationship.
All of our strategies now, we don't have to develop them to get out of them.
Yeah.
They all make profit. We can get our minor changes, development applications done and step out of them before.
Yeah, you can still get a value up and make a profit. Yeah.
What Shan said though, like it's so critical buying well. Like I don't care how good you are at building or subdividing or whatever your strategy. If you don't buy well to start off with, because as soon as you're in negative equity, if you pay market value because of your stamp duty and your bits and pieces, then you got to get back out if you need to sell it.
Yeah.
So it's so critical. Like we're lucky in the sense that we've been really good with the creative terms. So we've got long settlements. We've had, we nearly doubled our value on the property when we settled on it. So we've got this soft equity. So we know that worst case scenario, we can bring in a joint venture party, or we can bring in or we can sell the site.
Something to sell.
Yes.
You've got something soft equity that you can sell, essentially, get yourself out of the shit.
If you're buying a site and just hoping that you're going to get the DA and you don't have that serviceability, and we're not in that space yet. The way we've structured and done things, we're using private money.
Yeah.
That's not an option. So we have to structure deals that way, or we're doing joint ventures.
Yeah.
So
and it's basically, to wrap it up, it's have a plan A, have a plan B, have a plan C.
Yeah.
Not just one plan A and think everything's going to be, go to plan.
Yeah.
That's what these guys are really good at. That's what I've always done, even in business, right? Like have a strategy. And one of those things that can really help is actually sitting down again with an accountant or lawyer to start off with, and actually get that strategy down on paper and map out what the next 5-10 years looks like. Yeah. And I think that would help a lot of people. Mm-hmm. If you guys want to get a hold and get in contact with Ashley and GJ Walsh and co, we're setting up a page, www.unemployable.com.au /GJ Walsh. And you can set up an appointment. You can reach out to Ashley at any time. Well, again, we had a podcast earlier today about town planning, and it's a town planner that we're both using. And one of the what we love about him is he answers the phone. Yeah. And one thing I love about you, and I still don't understand how you guys do it, but you guys answer your phone 90% of the time. You answer the call, and that for me is priceless. Yeah. Like, I've not once sat down and tried to negotiate your rate. Yeah. I've not once looked at him and been like, hey, I think this is too much. You guys are fair. You guys know what you're doing. You're absolute legends. I mean, bloody hell, you're ex-professional V8 Supercar race car driver. And with the, was it the fastest lap or not the fastest lap?
Phillip Island. Yeah. We were talking off camera about
a
big crash that I had at Phillip Island in a prototype car. There was it was the Brabham car basically, and at the time it was quicker than the lap record at Phillip Island, and had something go wrong in turn one and turned the car into a plane and managed to get airlifted to Royal Melbourne, which was...
I don't think you can call it the fastest lap if you flew over the finish line.
Flew a little fast, I think. It's like you meant to have all four wheels on the ground, aren't you? Yeah. I think I got that part wrong.
And now we are all grateful because he is not a race car driver, and we get to access him and his accounting skills now. Yeah. So, yeah, if you want to get in contact with Ashley and the team, www.unemployable.com.au /GJ Walsh. And again, for any of you that are listening that aren't part of the Unemployable Property Free Facebook group, make sure you go on there. You'll be asked a certain amount of questions. We vet anyone that comes into the group. We're quite strict with, what's happening within that group. There's so much free value that is happening in there. Make sure you get on that. And Ashley, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on. I know it was a bit nerve-wracking for you at the beginning, but like I said, probably 10 minutes in, you forget that the cameras are even rolling. You're a natural. Shannon, Carson, thanks, as usual. And for those of you guys, like, share, subscribe. The Carson Bolt podcast is in full effect. And yeah, we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.
Hey there. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.